Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rebuild podcast. I'm your co-host, Carmen Turner, and I'm here with Beth Barodi and our special guest today, Peggy Bell.
I'm really excited for this episode because, as all of you have heard me speak numerous times before, I've sung her praises high and low. I'm so glad she has entered my life. But having Peggy come on to the Rebuild podcast just feels like a whole bunch of warm and fuzzies coming over and combining all of my worlds and all of the people that I love the most together. So, Peggy, we are so glad that you said yes, and we are so glad to have you here today with us.
Well, thank you. I think I'm blushing a little bit, maybe.
That's good. We are bringing guests on to the podcast in this season, and we've been able to speak with some pretty phenomenal women. And when Carmen and I were chatting about, who do we want, whose voices do we want to make sure that we have on the podcast and we're able to elevate, you were always like top of that list because you have been all over the mining industry, front, back, everywhere. You've kind of covered it all. And I know that you have quite a story throughout the industry, and you've had some great moments and some significant moments of rebuild yourself. And so we wanted to dive into those today with you. I think what I would love to hear just right off the bat, Carmen, again, kind of kicking at what we did last time, is just like, let's hear how your week's been. Let's just do a little check-in and a little how you doing, and hear where you're at right now. So Carmen, let's start with you, and then Peggy will end with you.
Cool.
Sure. So this week was great. I went to Calgary for some client meetings, which is always so good to just with the balance of like, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but completely immersing yourself in work when you're away. It just gives, I love to compartmentalize my life that way sometimes. Like I usually don't do it like that. I tried to balance it out. And so there's like a lot of prioritization and give and pull. But when I go away for work and I'm able just to hit it all, like that's what I'm doing, I really love to do that. So I felt like I got a lot done. And then I also spent some time with the Shift Critical guys. They had a client event, and we were talking about Modern Slavery Act and the new reporting regulations, CSRD, and all these requirements that companies are facing with ESG and how that's impacting them. And I spoke to so many great people and really enjoyed myself there. So that was great. And now it feels like the weekend was super busy because we had the first teenager of our kids become a teenager. My son turned 13, and that was, you know how it is planning their birthday parties and all that. It's all consuming, but also I just don't know where the time has gone. The 13 years, I don't know what's happened. So I'm nursing my sprained ankle a little bit, going to physio. It's healing, but to be honest, I'm not able to do like my stress outlet, which is running, and I haven't been able to do it for a few weeks. So that's catching up with me and getting really antsy. And we've got the season's first atmospheric river coming, which for people in Vancouver, BC, they know that term very well, which means about 100 millimeters of rain in a very short period of time. And so, yeah, we're facing climate change and the BC election is happening. I already voted in advance. And that's what's going on in my world.
Wow. I can totally relate to you with the having those really heavy work weeks where you're able to like go and just focus, and you get that energy from it. I think those were my last 2 weeks, but I'm very happy to say that this week I have been home and it's been awesome. And I've been watching the leaves change color right outside of my office window, and they're just like orange and red and yellow and just totally beautiful against like really, really blue sky. So it's been a really nice down week, and being able to just kind of catch up on work. But then also I love just meeting really incredible women, and I love women who love connecting people with other women. I think I'm one of those people. I'm connected with lots of those women. And so this week I've just had so many introductory calls or actual meetings with people who just like blow my mind. Like I just sit and I'm like, why are women not ruling the world? Why are we not doing this? Like we're so powerful and we're so smart and we're so intelligent and we just should be doing way more. And so that's the energy I've had all week this week and that I am carrying into the weekend with me. And it's like a quiet weekend for us. We don't have a whole lot going on, which I'm also excited for. And just feeling good about the week.
I have been doing that too, just having calls with mostly women, but some men too. I had actually a guy ask me if he can if men join Femina.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
And there's been advisors, but I don't know members because it is to change the experience of women.
Yeah.
I mean, but no, like I'll get back to you on that. So that was interesting. But I also had a call with a woman from a space company, which is so interesting.
Cool.
And she blew me away. Like I learned more from her. And she was giving me, like, showing me, because they are doing also CSRD and they're so advanced in that process. And so she gave me so many resources. And I tried who else do I need to talk to at the end of the call?
Nice.
And had two different new pathways from that, where she was like, oh, you got to talk to so and so, I'll introduce you. And so I love that. That's my takeaway, and I'm definitely implementing that in my weekly routine.
I love that. Peggy, how's your week going?
Yeah, my week's been busy. Happy that it was a short week. I am also nursing a small injury. I burned my arm on the wood stove up at the cottage, and yeah, I did all the things that you weren't supposed to do with burn. I did those, and so it's going to be a bit of a
Did you put butter on it? That's what my grandma always told me to do, is put butter on it.
That I didn't do, but I did burst.
Probably for the best. It's probably really bad advice. So don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good. Yeah, that would definitely keep the heat in. No, but I did burst the blister, so it's going to be bandaged up. Anyway,
Can you turn this into I feel like you can maybe turn this into a LinkedIn post.
oh yeah, I can probably something about
Draw a metaphor somehow.
yeah, no doubt. I can make a metaphor about
Don't pop the
anything.
blister.
Don't pop the blister. Or put your fear aside and rip off the Band-Aid.
There you go. There you go. Yep.
Yeah, it could go either way. So yeah, and I have like two sides to my life. I have the lab, which has been wicked busy, which is good because we're pretty gold focused. So it's good for the lab because it means that the gold sector is maybe going through a bit of an upswing, which is nice because we're always a leading indicator on that one. And then on the branding, marketing, all things guru, Beth is busy, which is always good. Got her booked on a couple podcasts, which is always a success for me. We onboarded a new member, which is also fantastic. And Catalyst so Catalyst is the entrepreneur arm of Femina that Beth likes me to take on. And so we onboarded a new member there, a new project manager, and made some connections around that as well. So it's a busy week all around. So.
And when Peggy says Catalyst is something that I like her to control, to be very fair, Catalyst is the entrepreneur arm of Femina that really came out of Peggy. Peggy has built it, has developed it, has built it from owning a business herself and seeing the benefit of connecting with other female entrepreneurs in the mining space and what can happen when you band together as opposed to everyone either competing or trying to get smaller contracts. And so she has done a phenomenal job at building out Catalyst for female entrepreneurs. So Peggy, I'm going to give it back to you. Maybe just give a little introduction, how you would introduce yourself. We've introduced you, but however you want to introduce yourself. And then let's just jump into it. Let's get into when you feel you've been going through a rebuild, what was happening, and we'll just dive into it.
Yeah, so I've been working on my pitch lately, which, as we know, for entrepreneurs is like, oh, it's so scary and terrible to do. So probably won't come out quite as right as I'd wanted to. But where I'm really focusing right now is building a business that make women famous in mining. And that came out of me working with you, Beth. But we work to build industry authority based in storytelling and thought leadership. And so the ultimate goal is to build this collection of industry legends that start to take on some of the men in the industry.
So that one day at the Mining Hall of Fame, it will be 4 female nominees for the first time, and 4 women will get inducted into the Mining Hall of Fame, not just 1, but 4, thanks to the work that Peggy is doing right now.
Yeah. My goal
can't happen soon enough.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Right. One of my goals is for the world to stop. We have like, call it 3, 4 men in the industry. We could probably all rattle off. And when they speak, the news media stops, and it's always at some sort of like LME or something like that. My goal is, in a positive way, the world stops and listens to them. My goal is to, make women be those men where the world stops and we get listened to, and we're like, oh, well, Beth Barodi or Carmen Turner said that, so we got to start to listen to what they're saying. So
it's broadening the stage, right? It's not replacing the men. It's actually just saying there is more space for everyone, and there's more space for more opinions and more space for more perspective. It's not a small pie. It's a very big one, and we haven't even began to share it nearly enough. And it's collectively building that space for everyone to be there equally. Yeah.
Peggy, I love what you said too about practicing your pitch. And because I don't know what it is, but so I have about, I have one-on-one clients right now that I love working with. And one of the things I think that they are all working on is I got to be able to like explain what it is that I do. And I got to come up with my pitch. And it feels like so overwhelming at first for them until they start to do it. And I always say, we're going to get there, and it's going to be based on your why. And it's going to be about you writing it out and explaining it, like learning to explain it like 20 different ways until it feels super comfortable. And you don't even like really think of it as like air quotes the pitch anymore, but it's all coming from a place of like service and value. And I feel like the way that you explained that, you're totally there already. I just was like, nodding my head. Hold on.
I love that. Thank you. I had a really hard time, which I think was a bit of an indication, not that I was on the wrong path with resource becoming, but I just wasn't comfortable in what it was that I was trying to accomplish. I had a horrible time trying to do a pitch with resource becoming. And in fact, a couple of mutuals that many of us know, they would pitch me better than I would myself. And because my thing would be like, I do things, like I do stuff, but like this one is much more easy. And I think it's because I'm far more rooted in the skills as opposed to the outcome that I was trying to achieve. The outcome hasn't changed. It's still industry diversification. It's still promoting gender diverse people and intersectionalities within the industry. But the skills and how I'm trying to accomplish it has changed. And it's far more rooted in my background than it is in me trying to do a full 180 into consulting on a human level.
Well, and it's rooted in your passion and what you're really good at too. So I have been working my way through this book called The Pivot Year. It's by Brianna Weist. And it's kind of like every day there's like a little reading for it. And so I want to read this one because I think this makes a lot of sense for what we're just talking about. And then going in, Peggy, to your story around resource becoming and where you are now. So it says, what if you knew that you were never meant to get it right the first time, but to build it through trial and error? How much more grace would you give yourself? How much more human might you be? How much more could you gain from your experiences if your expectation wasn't that you were supposed to be initially and unquestionably perfect, but that the sculpting of your soul would emerge through the consistency by which you showed up and kept trying, kept going, kept forging yourself through the fire of your own fear?
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that amazing? I read that yesterday with my own like kind of thoughts and things going on with Femina. And I was like, there it is, folks. There it is. We don't have to be perfect right off the bat. And it's about taking those learnings and trying and just staying true to that purpose and that drive that's like leading you forward to say, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going and I'm going to keep doing it. So that just seemed like a good spot to pull that in.
I heard a really good quote the other day is that when companies like try things and fail, they call it R&D, but entrepreneurs say like, oh, I failed, or like, I didn't, like, that's it. I must not be like, especially women tend to say, oh, I'm just not an entrepreneur, I guess.
rather than
not for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Peggy, take us through your story. So take us through, you come from a corporate background, you come from BD, but you're now at a point where you have your pitch figured out, you know what you want to do, and walk us through what that's been like for you over the last few years.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'd have to go back even further, because when I was thinking about this, if I was to look at back in my life, I have two major rebuild periods. And the first one is what brought me to mining. And the second one is kind of how I got to resource becoming. And so my first rebuild period was my divorce. So I had been married to my ex-husband. We had been together 8 years, married for 4, had 2 kids. And he woke up one day. I would go to the gym so early in the morning, like, oh, so stupid. Like, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning. My cortisol was probably through the roof, but anyway. And he like woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm not in love with you anymore." And I'm like, "Oh." I said, "You're going to go to work. I'm going to go to the gym. You think about what you just said and we'll regroup later."
Whoa.
Yeah. And so immediately I had been working for him. He owns an HVAC company that's still very, very successful. And we had built that in 4 years from like $175,000 worth of revenue to well over $1 million. Like, so massive growth for the business. And it was very stressful and bringing on a lot of infrastructure and capital and assets. And so I was like, well, crap, I guess I need to go find a job, right? So I went to the hotel. I come from a hotel resort management business background. And they said, well, we're not hiring, but my former employer was. That's one of the biggest laboratories in the world for mining. And so I sent off this CV that never should have passed, right? Like, I look at it, or I did look at it, and it was riddled with grammar and spelling mistakes. And I was like, I should not have even gotten a call. Like, how did I even get that much? And yeah, sure enough, I joined them as the Canadian marketing coordinator for the environmental sector, which at that point with that company was very mining heavy. It was like our lab was built totally backwards from a classical environmental perspective. And that kind of is what got me into mining, was that whole event and that whole sheer determination that I'll never be dependent upon a man ever again. I gotta make sure my kids are okay, and probably not the best parenting time because my brain was going through so much healing and all that other stuff. But definitely was like the determination of never again will I be dependent on a man.
I think it's one of those things that we hear more and more and more, is those like accidental falling into mining. And I think through Femina, you and I especially, we hear that with members all the time. And I think one of my favorite things about you is that every time we talk every single day, multiple times a day. You're like the number one person on my text list, but yet every time I still learn things about you. And one of my favorite things about you is how diverse your background is. The fact that you just said that you come from hotel like management, I didn't know that. You also have like a yoga background. You also have a BD background. Like you are one of those people that just has touched everything at some point in their life. But I think that that's what makes you so good at everything that you do, because you never just tracked from like A to Z, right? You took all of these different paths, you tried all of these different things, and obviously very unfortunate circumstance of your divorce happening, but landed you in mining and landed you in this career where now like people know who you are. People know your name because of the work that you've done in this industry and the voice that you have in this industry. And you're like meant to be here. Like, this is where Peggy is meant to be, is making this change in this industry.
Well, and I think that's a big piece of, like, that is something that has only come to comfort now. Like, when I was with the lab, it was very much you don't know what you're talking about. You don't come from mining. You are not a geochemist or certified lab tech or metallurgist or whatever that
Technical. You're not technical.
Not technical. Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time believing that, really, is that that mining was not what I was a part of. And I got to a place with the lab where there was a lot of challenges. And it was no longer a psychologically healthy place for me to be, like abuse of power and what have you. And I went to consulting, to massive engineering consulting firm, running their sales, and that was never questioned, right? So there was never any, there was maybe like some discussion around, should we go into mining because of the cyclical nature of it, all this other stuff. They had a mining practice that they shut down and were trying to bring it back, but there was never any question about what my field of expertise was so much. Like there was only one time I remember in that position where I was wanting to say, listen, I don't tell you how to build a landfill liner. How about you don't tell me how to deal with clients, because pick up the phone, right? And call. So there was never that was very rare. And then when I went out to Resource Becoming, that's really where my ground, like where that grounding in, wait a second, I always did know. I just had a different perspective that was not seen, maybe.
And what made you take that leap for Resourcing Becoming?
I think the leap was really that I'm impatient. I'm neurodivergent. So like, I think maybe Beth, you're the only person that I've ever constructively taken, I don't want to say criticism, but like checks from, or feedback or whatever that is. So I don't take feedback overly well. I don't, I have, it's called, it's when you're too sensitive, not too sensitive, but anyway, there's an actual term where you get very, very, you feel attacked when you're getting feedback, even though that other person isn't necessarily attacking you. And so I also get very, I didn't realize how much of a control freak I was until I started working with Femina more deeply. And I was like, that was not done the way I was expecting it to be done. And so me trying to deal with the my own control issues too, all of that was like, I want this industry to go faster, and I can do that on my own. So if I leave, I'll be able to make all of these changes, which wasn't really the way it turned out, but it was definitely what made me feel more confident in who I am and who I am in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a big leap, right? It's a big leap going from that security of a job, even if it's not fulfilling everything that you necessarily want. It's really hard to say goodbye to a paycheck. And it's really hard to say, I have enough confidence in myself and my well-being to know that I'm going to make this work or make something work regardless. And we've had this conversation a couple times in a few different ways over different episodes that we've had, where we also see women starting to make these decisions more and more in mining in particular, and kind of surrounding services to mining, is that we are seeing more women starting their companies because they have been within a company or within a consulting firm or whatever it may be, and have felt exactly that. It's not moving as fast as we want. We're not adapting to change. We're not responding to what we need to be doing. So we're just going to go out and do it on our own. And there are some incredibly successful women, yourself included in that, who are doing some really phenomenal things in the industry. And so you started Resourcing Becoming. That's really when you and I started, when we met, was you joined Femina, and Resourcing Becoming was kind of starting all at the same time. And we as the collective at large, we've got to watch you even evolve over the last, what's it been, almost 2 years, 18 months, 2 years now, into where you are now. And I love watching you work. I think, you and I work very differently. We have very different ways of doing things. I think I'm much more type A in some ways. I'm not neurodivergent, though I've had this conversation with many people where I think they're we say neurodivergent and non-neurodivergent, and the non-neurodivergent people actually seem to be in the minority, but it actually seems that a lot of the structures were built around, again, white men who were in power, who all thought the same. And so anyone who is different than that is now all of a sudden neurodivergent, as opposed to looking at creative ways of thinking. And so you have taught me so much, even in the last almost year that we've been working together with Femina, about how to work with different people, how to people have different experiences, those sorts of things. And watching you own that space more and more of who you are and the type of leader you are has been really phenomenal, because I think you're just having so much impact and influence with so many people around you, being able to voice all of these sorts of things. We don't talk, or we haven't talked about neurodivergence in mining. We don't talk about different. We don't talk about things that may not fit in the mold. And you're so good at pulling that out. You had Resource Becoming. You started Changing Face of Mining, which is like a weekly LinkedIn Live podcast show that you do, and you have phenomenal guests covering such an array of topics. And I think what you're doing is you're opening the door for people to speak about the things that matter to them, not just what's happening in the market. What's this company doing? What's this commodity doing? What, new technology are people using for drilling or whatever it may be? You're talking about the human side of mining and how we're all showing up and all the challenges that we're facing. And I think that is just needed more and more and more. And you're very brave and very courageous for being able to speak about those things so publicly and set that stage for others.
Yeah, I think a big part of that was once you leave corporate, you have these shackles that kind of come off, right? And so if people are going to work with me, I don't ever want to go back to a place where the shackles are back on. So whomever is going to work with me, whether that is in I'm an employee side or in a contract side, this is who I am. I will conflate, I will probably exaggerate, which, by the way, miners hate exaggeration. They want specificity. And that was one of the things that would drive them crazy about me, is that I would maybe exaggerate and then they'd have to be like, they would have to rein me in. And anyway, so like,
it's not that you exaggerate, but they're just extremely literal.
Well, yeah.
And factual, and like to the point of like, okay, this is real life.
Yeah, like pedanticism, I word, I feel like it should be. Yeah, sorry, that's Stephen. Yeah, like that was a big part of it, is that this is going to be me. And I think it's so funny because Beth has reached the point now where like over the weekend, she was like, oh, I just knew what state of mind you were in when you were writing that. And so she knows when I probably need to be pulled back. And so I think it's funny because I do get very excited. And when I excite, I move very quickly. And sometimes it's great. Sometimes it needs more revision. So that's just who I am. So here I am, and I'm going to be me. And I'm not really going to change that anymore. The Changing Face of Mining, I started that on a fluke. And like, I just wanted to do something, talk to somebody I found interesting on the internet and see if anybody would listen. And so my intention was never really for it to be necessarily the human side. I think that's just what I bring to the table, is the human side. And there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of different ideas. And in some keynotes, I've said it doesn't matter if we have a fully autonomous mine, we still need people to be somehow involved. So you're never going to fully do away with that people side of mining, especially when you say you do have a fully autonomous mine. Now you have communities that can't participate based on jobs necessarily. So how do you now develop value to surrounding communities and places and nations if there's no jobs aspect to it? Because that's always been our go-to, which, is a problem in and of itself. And so I think when you look at how that came about, there's just so many different great ideas and stories out there to be told that we don't listen to. And one day it'd be great for me to turn that into something for society. I don't know if it will get there, but I just definitely don't, as per my background, I don't necessarily follow the one path or do the path that I should. And I think Beth and I have some similarities there. Like if my parents said go right, I was immediately going left, and as hard as I possibly could. So if society is going to tell me that I need to take this path, I'm going to say, no, I'm good, thanks. I'm going to see what's over here instead and see if I can make that work. So yeah, that's where, and I'm so excited now because it just keeps on growing. And like, I'm actually thinking, well, what is the service that I can put behind my own experience of creating the changing face of mining? Because there's so many people out there that want to do these lives or webinars that maybe get intimidated by the technology, right? So
I think that's a common thread between the three of us and the work that we have all been doing. Like Carmen with her coaching, me with Femina, you with changing faces and resource becoming. It's doing that next step. It's like, okay, yeah, I found a gap, intentionally or unintentionally, and what I'm doing is working. And so what's next? How do I take that next step? What else is needed there? And I think that that's why the three of us in our own rightful places, and then in some ways together, we kind of all overlap in different ways, have been so successful together, because it is bringing something new to the table. And it is not just allowing one type of voice, like Carmen, when you said, maybe they're just really literal, and they're very technical. That makes a lot of sense to also why there's resistance to change and why we're not seeing things move, because it doesn't fit in that what I know to be the path I'm supposed to take or what we're supposed to be doing. And I think it takes people and women like us to come and say, we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to keep coming to the table. We're going to keep trying things. Maybe something doesn't work how we thought, but we're going to pivot and we're going to do something else. And we keep bringing that forward and keep building our communities and keep building that momentum, so that what was literal and what people kind of take as solid truth starts getting shifted a little bit, and we start seeing more of those different perspectives coming in.
When I was trying to do the very hard DEI consulting, that was one of the biggest pieces that I noticed, is that when you're dealing with a deposit, you can, you have your recovery and your exploration, and then your process, and then your recovery and all this other stuff. Typically, like if you have a nuggety gold deposit in one area and a nuggety deposit in another area, there are similarities there that you can bring to the table, right? You can say, I draw upon this experience over here, and I will bring it to this experience over. And so you do have to work through problems and solutions to meet the needs of the business around how can you increase recovery, or how can you optimize production. But it's not changeable the same way that people are. And that's what is freaking one of many things. The misunderstanding of what equity is, as far as we have, a lot of jobs that need to be filled. We can't fill those all with men. We need gender diverse people, right, to be in them. But ultimately, people are changeable. So what might work for one group of people at one company may not work for what you may think to be the same group of people at another company. And so that is very confusing. Why? Well, I did this at company A. Why is it not working here? Well, you're dealing with a whole different culture and a whole different location and so many other things. And that was one of the biggest mind blocks for a lot of people, was that idea that they just can't plug and play solutions.
Well, people want outcomes. They don't want the process to get to those outcomes.
Oh yeah, that was a big one.
And we tend to think that DEI is just hire more women. That is DEI in mining. It's just, as long as we have women, we've checked the box. But it is that outcome piece, which we've talked about a lot. And I'm just thinking right now, Carmen, you and I have chatted about this so many times, about like that process and really building out the process, and how do companies actually lean into the process without needing to have a very defined outcome, knowing where they want to go, knowing what they want to happen, but not defining that so much that they block themselves from being able to see anything differently.
Yeah, you don't want to block the creativity. It's like you need the constraints and the vision of where you want to work towards, and some rules. It's kind of like, I always say, it's like a game of soccer, right? Like there are rules that everyone kind of has to follow. There's a vision and the goal of
winning, getting more goals, balls in the net than the other team, but the creativity around what plays you do, who you pass to, like all of that can change, you know, and like what works, what doesn't work. Like that's what I kind of lean into is it could be, you don't block the creativity.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see that more and more as we continue to see the talent pool in mining just naturally diversify from backgrounds, right? Because we're seeing less traditional kind of miners coming into the industry because we're seeing a lot more tech influence, we're seeing a lot more financial influence. And so we're seeing people from different industries now come into mining, that I wonder if we're going to naturally see a shift on how we operate and what that's going to do to the people who are really comfortable with how it's operating right now and the discomfort that's going to cause, but the benefit overall to everyone that we're going to see when we just have a different looking workforce, a different talent pool to draw from that isn't just a traditional mining background.
Yeah, I wonder, like, so having worked in that global sphere of mining services, Africa is very much an outsourcing model. You outsource a lot in Africa. We don't outsource as much in North America. And so what I'm starting to wonder is that as women and young people come up, if we're going to be forced into an outsourcing model, right? Because we're not going to have necessarily the willingness, or it might be a very short period of willingness. I'm going to work for an operator for 5 years and then take what I learn and go out on my own. To your point around women going out on their own, the number of women I've spoke to that are wanting to do that because of workplace trauma and wanting to feel that need of safety, like there's an undercurrent there of really intelligent, highly capable women that are like, I don't feel the need to put up with this crap anymore. I'm going to now do this for myself. And if you look at like talent such as Jessica Scanlon or Kate Larson or some of those young women who they only spent like maybe 3 or 4 years in operations, and then they said, no, I've had this experience. You know, maybe it didn't end as well as I wanted it to. So now I'm going to do it for myself and I'm going to make a life that I want to see. And that is so exciting to me, is to watch all these young women out there. I know, Beth, you and I have talked about this a lot, where they're just so amazing. Like the sense of self they have at such a young age is absolutely fascinating to me. Like they'll even say, no, don't have the capacity for that right now. And when I was their age, I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take it on. I might be dying under the weight of it, but yeah, keep it coming. So
that's good. That's a good shift that we want to see, right? It's the ability for people to have their own autonomy and that they are not their job. And they are not just what their job requires of them. They are a person that has a job, and they treat it as such. And I've spoken about this woman before, but there's a woman in Femina who I also have just learned so much from, because she is so good at doing this when it comes to her kids and her family. And she is so good at boundaries around her family time and her time with her kids. And no matter whatever comes up, it's like, nope, I can't. I have something to do with my kids and they come first. And I look at that and I'm like, I want to emulate that. I want to take that on because I see how much more, like, obviously that's far more important than the job, but we do just have this kind of pressure to be like, well, if you're not doing something work related, then really what are you doing type thing. But I think that that's what's led a lot of people to these like aha moments or these rebuild moments, is exactly what you said, is they get to a point where they're like, I'm not putting up with it anymore. I'm not doing it. That's what happened to me. Workplace trauma for sure. That Carmen burnt out. Carmen faced her own challenges. Like we went through this, and it's like, yeah, not doing it again. Thanks very much. And making sure that again, you then have that confidence in yourself to say, I'm good enough. I'm good enough to do something else, and I'm good enough to build something that I want to build. And then when you watch that happen and you watch yourself just kind of move into these spots that just light you up and fuel you, like magic happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. Carmen, is there anything you want to add before we wrap her up?
No, I just think that I just like that point about, you know, the younger generation who's coming up and setting stronger boundaries and really leaning into their strengths, and also something just came up for me around, I know, like looking back, part of, I think, where maybe I went wrong was, not necessarily went wrong, but what I look at now is that, I worked so hard and I built something and wasn't given the credit where credit was somebody else, like the men, typically men, and they took credit for it. And then that was, I'd love to see that women are now standing up, taking the credit, and then having the courage to go out on their own, or like if something's not working, like, no, that's not working for me, and seeing their own value. Like, I don't think I saw the value. I was like, this is really experimental. No one's really doing this, but this is where we need to go, because I was thinking differently. I wasn't like the literal technical person. I was like, oh, I'm a newcomer, so I must be wrong. But actually, I think I know I'm right. And then it was like, oh, you are right. And oh, you've like helped us turn the company around, and you've helped us like set up this new practice, and now we're getting recognition, and thank you so much. But I really wasn't given, somebody else took the credit for that. So that's just kind of something that popped up.
I feel that. Had that happen as well. I think I had all of my work, I watched it all just get completely all thrown out simply because I developed it. And it's that credit piece, and all of that is that is
maybe that's an area for discussion. Like, how do we, I don't know, what can I'd love to talk about how do we overcome that.
Yeah, there's a couple members in Femino that have gone through that I've spoken with, and they're trying to almost find the evidence of the creation of the program that they did. And so that when they put it on their CV or whatever, then one member in general, I said, is that on your CV? And she said, no. And I said, okay, well, it definitely needs to be. Like, that's a pretty amazing program you developed. And I said, you don't necessarily need to have all of that stuff back there. What you need, maybe for this particular purpose, not to align it with yours and Beth's, is allies that were there with you, that can sponsor that work when you're not in the room, that can say, yes, absolutely, she did do that, and that this was the outcomes that we saw, and she does deserve the credit for that, right? So
I think also in just through my own experience, it is also just learning to speak about it regardless of people like you speaking about it or not. It's saying, no, I built that, I did that, and that was me, and not allowing the people who don't want you to get that credit to take all of the spotlight. And it's not in a malicious way. It's just, I had this a few weeks ago. I was able to speak on another podcast, and it was specifically about my VP role with New Gold. And it was the first time since leaving New Gold that I actually spoke about everything that I was able to accomplish there and what I was able to build on the sustainability side. And it felt weird. It felt really weird to do it, but it is what I did. It is literally what I dedicated my life to for 5 years. And I think as women, we just need to have the confidence to be able to say, yeah, I did that. And know that and Carmen, this is actually something that I learned from you over the years. It is not waiting for the external validation. It is knowing with yourself that we don't get to control what other people are going to say or how they're going to act about us or what they're going to say about our work or anything like that. But what we can control is what we know is true for us and what we know and what we do with us. And that's what I've been really leaning into, is like really being positive about what I was able to do and what I was able to develop and learn and grow myself. Because that is my truth and that is what happens.
Regardless of how it ended or how you moved on. It's always a story of like how somebody moves on, right? Like rarely is it like, oh, tied up in a pretty bow. But we can't like put those experiences under the rug, because then it takes it away from somebody else learning about what actually happened and how you built something. It's like, and I was just thinking as I was, as you were talking, like there was actually a case study written on the strategy that we developed. And I remember the senior person explicitly said, we want to take the names out of the people involved, aka you. across because we want to make it more like this is how so it was washed down to made it be generic, which actually the whole purpose of that case study was washed away, because the point of it was it only takes one person to create powerful change. It only takes one person, and obviously they influence, other people are involved, but it's got like somebody who brings a new idea to the table can create huge impact. And if you don't say that, like, that just waters it down, it dilutes it. And actually that person who was a woman, a senior executive, who was like, no, we don't want to name names. And so
Yeah,
you know,
could do
like,
a podcast episode just on that.
we can.
Really.
Yeah. But I think you're right too, right? It very much is tied up in depending on how you move from a company, your entire identity for that company, it was within the last few moments of when you were there, as opposed to your full tenure of what was there. And generally that full tenure has a lot of really great things in it, and a lot of great moments and great developments and growth and learning and those sorts of things. But we tend, man or woman, we tend to just look at it from the last moments. And that's kind of, it's like, what's that saying? Throw everything out with the tub.
Baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, whatever that was. On that front. So I agree. I think that's something that we should definitely explore in an episode all on its own, because I think that we want, especially women, to feel really proud about what they've done, what they've created. And women create all the time. Look at the three of us again. Like, we just create all the time, and we create really good things. And so and men take credit for what they do all the time without a second guess. And they're praised for having that confidence. Women take credit for what they do, and we're seen as arrogant, and we're seen as uncouth, and, those sorts of things. And it's like, screw that. We get to be proud about how we show up and what we do in this industry. And I think, again, Peggy, just bringing it back to you and what we've chatted about in this episode, it's like, I feel you do that all the time. You show up so much as yourself, and you own the space that you're in, and you make it so safe and welcoming for so many other people. And I think that is just magic. It's just magic. And we just need to be seeing more and more of that.
Oh, thank you. I have no idea how I do it.
Well, keep doing it.
Okay.
Keep doing it.
I love it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Peggy, thank you so much for joining us today and for having this discussion with us. We knew it was going to be great, and we just love, where the conversation flows. So thank you so much. And until next time, we'll see y'all later.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.